Hi guys, we're back with an update on the 32nd scale Mark 1 Ford Escort from Airfix. This one here, for those of you who haven't watched the first video. And where we stand at the moment is all the parts have got some paint on them. They're not all complete as yet, but essentially what I've been doing is going through doing the main body colour, as you can see down here, and then the various gloss, matte and satin black work. Now first of all we'll look at the main body colour, and the kit has been painted in this beautiful shade of blue, which is a Humbrol enamel. I'm not entirely pleased with the paint finish on this. I'm hoping that we can get this to focus and show you. But on the front wings, for example, if I can catch the light there for you, you can see that there's a bit of dust and what have you captured. It's entirely my own fault. I didn't give my hobby room a good clean out and allow the dust to settle before I sprayed, and it's long overdue a vacuuming and a clean out. But hopefully what I'm going to do with this is give this a sanding with some micromesh, some very fine micromesh pads, as I did with the base layer with the primer. And I'm going to sand this and try and get a nice smooth finish, and then we're going to go over that with a couple of coats of Humbrol clear gloss, and hopefully that should look nice and shiny. Prior to doing that, I am going to run a pin wash down the door shuts, the boot lid, the door shuts, and in the grills, the air vent grills at the rear and at the front, just under the windscreen here, to make those details pop out a little bit. And the same with the bonnet here. I'm going to carefully give that a scuff over with the very fine stuff, being particularly careful to try not to destroy the raised Ford lettering, which you probably can't see very easily, but it does have the Ford logo stamped into the front edge of the bonnet as per the real thing. I'm going to try to pick those out in silver, which will be fun, being incredibly tiny. And then the base of the chassis here, rather than just be boring and just do the whole lot black as I was planning to do originally, I decided to do the floor pan and inner wings and everything in body colour. Although in reality a lot of these parts, such as the wheel arches, front and rear wheel arches and such, would just be caked in thick black undercoat. But I thought, what the hell, we'll just assume that this has had a restoration and the owner has actually painted everything to make it look very nice. So we've got the chassis frame rails in a satin black and the fuel tank in a satin black, and then this is going to get a very dirty sort of oil wash to all over the base, to replicate the sort of mucky day-to-day use of a restored car that may be going to classic shows and such like. So it will have a dirtied up look, but it won't just be all black and boring and plain. As you can see, I haven't painted any of the seats as yet. The interior is going to be a sort of beige colour with tan sort of faux leather seats, pleather or whatever you want to call them, vinyl seats as were very, very common in cars of this age. Looking at one of the sprues here, we have a lot of parts painted in various shades of black, in gloss, satin and matte. Perhaps the easiest one to give you an example is the handbrake here. We've got the rubber gator painted in matte, the actual metal portion of the handbrake in a satin black, and then the hand grip portion in a gloss black. Very hard to see because they're incredibly tiny parts. Same kind of thing with the suspension struts just here. We've got semi-gloss on the main suspension struts and then a matte black on the rubber gators, the portion that fits over them. And then just to add a little splash of colour, we've got the battery and the fan painted in yellow. Metal fans would typically be a satin black, plastic ones typically white, but sometimes you'd see the metal ones painted yellow, so I thought, well, why not add a splash of colour amidst all that sea of boring dull black, and we'll make a yellow fan to fit on. And the rest of the parts are largely the same. We've got parts painted in either glosses or there's this little panel here which is to fit on the rear where the rear bumper goes, which is obviously body colour. And here we've got the front grille, which is painted in gloss black. Now there's a few items painted in gloss black in preparation for being sprayed with alclad, aluminium or chrome, namely the door handles, the filler cap, the grille and the hubcaps. And they will be sprayed with alclad to replicate the chrome or the aluminium accordingly. And I think the final thing to add to this update, and the bumpers as well of course, are going to be painted in alclad, chrome or aluminium depending on which I do. I know it should be chrome technically, but the aluminium is very shiny as well, the alclad. We've got the rear axle and the front axle here, and then the prop shaft and what have you. Now these, once fitted, are, well, possibly prior to fitting, are going to get a bit of a dry brushing with a metallic silver, which I've used before on the underside of cars, and just a very light dry brushing with metallic silver gives them a nice sort of metallic sheen and simulates a little bit of wear and usage. I've got the camera on macro mode so that I can show you some of the close-up detail a little bit better. This is the engine and gearbox, which for a 30-second scale I'm absolutely astounded with. I've seen less well detailed 24th scale V8s and what have you when I've built some of the old AMT kits and things before. So the detail on this is really quite remarkable. I'm very pleased with it. What I've tried to do as well is separate the metals out a little bit using Citadel's mithril silver bolt gun metal and what's the other one? Chainmail, which are aluminium, steel and gunmetal respectively. Unfortunately the separation isn't quite as apparent as I'd hoped it would be, but this will have an overall wash anyway, dirtying it up a little bit, and hopefully that will make enough of a difference. But for example, the gearbox is painted with, oops, gone out of frame, apologies for that. The gearbox is painted with aluminium and the bell housing with bolt gun metal or chainmail, one or the other, I forget, just to give that a little bit of separation. So the bell housing, which is separate, which can be removed from the gearbox, is just to make it a separate colour. And then we've got the starter motor down there, the exhaust manifold, which is painted with either gunmetal or chainmail. And then what I've tried to do is paint the block and the cylinder head slightly different colours, but I could have done with a much more noticeable separation there, because on these you've got a cast iron cylinder block with an aluminium cylinder head, and then of course the rocker cover and the sump are pressed tin and typically painted black. Over on this side of it, let's flip it over for you, we've got the typical brown, sort of Bakelite brown colour of the distributor cap, which anyone familiar with British cars of this era will be familiar with the colour. I've painted the oil filter in a white just to differentiate it and make it stand out a little bit more, and then the carburettor on the top is painted in aluminium, and the inlet manifold is a slightly dark shade. It's very, very hard to tell. I'm finding it hard to tell looking at it in person, unfortunately. I'd hope the colour separation would be better, but with a bit of an oil wash on I think that will look very nice indeed, and hopefully it will look nice enough to maybe even have a bonnet or hood open or off display. So that's the engine, quite delighted with that. The wheels as yet I haven't painted. I'm just going to quickly show you a close-up of this sprue and hopefully give you a better idea of the colour separation. It's tricky trying to get this, there we go. Okay, so we've got the air filter in a satin black. Trying to catch the light here so you can see, hopefully that shows a bit better. So the handbrake, as I say, we've got matte black on the gaiter, satin black on the metal shaft and gloss black on the plastic handle. We've got satin black and on the suspension struts and matte black on what would be the rubber gaiters, and then of course the battery there in yellow and the fan in yellow, the brake master cylinder, the radiator in a satin black, and various little parts here. Again, hard to see, but what we've got is gloss black for the pulleys, and a matte black for the belt, for the fan belt, and a couple more portions. This portion underneath, which is the brace for the gearbox underneath the body, and the air filter, as I say, as I've already said. A couple of bits unpainted. These are the bits that go inside the wheel, so I'm not bothering with those because they're going to be out of sight and hidden anyway. And then a couple of bits with paint detail to be added as yet. But that's where we are just now. So thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll have another update soon. So please check back.